I'm Rowan Hale. The lights in the hall are warm and bright, chandeliers blinking like a sky I cannot touch. Marble under my shoes throws back every sound. The band falling quiet as I step into the aisle. My father rises from his seat. Colonel Patrick Hale, retired, shoulders square, chin set. His palm cracks across my cheek, and the room gasps, like one body. Heat blooms where the skin meets bone. The sound keeps ringing even after his hand drops. I taste metal, smell floor polish, and feel the air turn thin. I refuse to sway. My spine locks, my breath slows, and I let my hands fall open at my sides. Hundreds of eyes pin me in place, as if the chandeliers have swung down and trapped me in light. "You are not welcome here," he says, each word cut clean for the crowd. I hold his stare and give him nothing back. Not a tear, not a flinch, not a single stray breath he can claim. Somewhere to my left, glass touches linen and rattles, then stills. I see my mother press her fingers to her mouth, my brother studying the carpet. The stage flags hang heavy, quiet, like a paused storm. This is not the first time he has tried to make me small. It is just the first time he has chosen a room this large. My jaw sets, and the sting on my cheek becomes a steady burn that I can carry. I notice a scuff on the marble at my feet. I place my heel over it and find the ground. I am not here to beg or bargain. I am here to stand. The hall holds its breath with me. My cheek throbs, my pulse evens, and the silence stretches until it becomes its own kind of sound. Then something shifts behind me, low and rough, like furniture waking up. Chairs scrape. Not one, not two, many. The scrape rolls across the floor in a wave and stops just short of my back. If you have ever felt erased by the people who should have known you best, you might hear yourself in this moment. The sound behind me is not nothing. It is a beginning. The summer I turned 18, Richmond felt like a stove left on low. The house held the day's heat, and the hallway smelled like polish and old paper. Cicadas buzzed through the screens as if they lived in our walls. My father stood in the dining room under his shadow box of ribbons. I told him I would serve, but in my own way, not on the track he drew with his finger and his temper. I said I wanted a life I could carry, not one I had to borrow. "Shame," he said, like the word was a rank he could pin on my chest. His hand rose and landed before I could step back. The crack folded the room into a tight square of sound. My cheek burned hot, and the family photos swam. My mother pressed a napkin to nothing in particular and stared at the table. My brother Miles looked past me, like I was a window. My father yanked open my dresser and dragged a duffel from the closet. Shirts flew, socks hit the floor, the zipper snarled, and then caught. He shoved the bag against my ribs and pointed at the door. The night outside was thick as syrup. The porch light cut a yellow circle that stopped at the steps, and the lawn beyond smelled like cut grass and wet dirt. I stood in that glow long enough to hear the screen clap shut behind me. I walked. Street by street, the map of my childhood turned into a path out. The air clung to my skin, and the cicadas kept time like a metronome I could not switch off. Grief tried to flood me, then changed shape. It shrank into a hard stone I could put in my pocket and keep. I touched my cheek, felt the heat there, and decided it would not be the hottest thing I ever survived. A bus stopped and carried me to a part of town I did not know well. I found a bench under a flickering light and watched the sky go pale at the edges. When the shops unlocked, I followed a flag poster to a glass door with a bell. The recruiting office smelled like coffee and toner. A young sergeant slid forms across a desk and spoke in a voice that did not push or pull. He handed me a pen and pointed to a line with my name printed under it. My hand trembled once, then steadied. I pressed the tip to the paper, heard the scratch, and watched ink turn into a promise. I signed. Before dawn, the track looked like a dark ribbon cut into the earth. We ran until the air burned, and my breath scratched my throat. Frost lifted off the grass and clung to our boots. My legs argued with me on the hills. I learned to answer with smaller steps and a steadier head. The sun came up on faces the color of brick. Pull-ups were worse. My forearms shook and my grip went slick, and I counted to 3 and held anyway. The bar felt like a metal truth that did not care about my past. Whispers floated between lockers and along chow lines. She will quit. She looks soft. I let them talk while I laced my shoes. Pain is temporary. Quitting is forever. Drill instructors hunted our weak spots with smiles and stopwatches. My weak spot was the pause before the last rep. I filled it with breath, and one more rep anyway. Blisters peeled and reformed. I taped them and ran. The cadence songs got into my head and crowded out the house I had left. Night brought arms that felt like rope and shoulders that hummed like wires. I learned to eat fast, to fix my blister tape, and to sleep inside 5 minutes. I woke before the whistle because my feet wanted the ground. Once, I failed a timed ruck by 8 seconds. I could taste the failure like pennies on my tongue. I reset my straps, asked for the retest, and shaved off 30. The platoon watched in the way people watch the weather. No cheers. Just a shift in how they lined up around me, a small space that opened when I moved. I did not become the strongest or the fastest. I became the one who would not stop when the easy reasons to stop showed up. People start to borrow that kind of steadily. Weeks turned into months marked by sand, chalk, and sweat salt drying on sleeves. I could feel my father's voice fall out of my head and hit the floor like a coin. It rolled away and did not come back. On a gray morning after a long grind, the cadre called my name at the pull-up bars. He studied the logbook in my hands. Then he nodded toward the far field and said, "There is a team for people who do not quit." Dust stuck to my teeth and turned the air the color of old canvas. Radios hissed in my ear, voices clipped and calm because fear wastes time. We moved before the echo finished, and people came home because decisions were made on time. Convoys felt like math problems with lives inside them. I kept count of turns, sight lines, and shadows that did not match the map. When doubt showed up, I chose and owned the choice. I learned to walk a perimeter with my hands open so people could see I was not asking them to do anything I would not do. My boots sank in the same mud and found the same holes. That mattered more than rank. Helos punched the air and threw sand across our faces. Rotor wash carried sweat and diesel to the back of my throat. I checked tourniquets with my own hands, then stepped back so medics could work. Briefings were tight, not pretty. I spread photos on a crate and used a gloved finger to trace the route. Then I asked for smarter ideas and took the best one. People follow plans they helped build. Night work taught me to listen for shapes. A pause on the net could mean a bad turn 2 blocks ahead. I learned to hear it, shift pace, and save a minute we would need later. Sometimes the math failed anyway. We stood in a sun that did not care and watched a stretcher go by. I kept the rest of the team moving because grief can walk, but it cannot lead. Memorials were simple and correct. Families pinned medals with hands that shook and held on. My row stayed empty, and the silence there cooled into something hard enough to carry. I wrote letters to parents when it was my job to do so. I told the truth, and I kept it short and clean. I promised I would honor the way their kid had shown up, and then I did. Reputation grows in small rooms long before it shows in large ones. People began to ask for me when missions stacked and the weather turned wrong. They said I kept my word and that I did not look away when it hurt. I measured success by head count at the end of a day, and by the way, a room breathed after we crossed a line. I started to feel a weight settle on my shoulders that felt like trust. I did not brush it off. After a year of these turns, the report on my desk was brief, stamped, and to the point. It praised judgment under pressure and leadership by example. It also carried one sentence that changed my next map. Recommend Hale for the Joint Task Force Command. The move into naval special warfare felt less like a jump and more like a lock clicking into place. I joined a joint element that worked beside SEAL teams, not in front of them, and my job was to make sure air, sea, and ground plans met in the same minute. I learned the rooms, the rhythms, and the faces that mattered when time got narrow. Planning started on whiteboards and ended in quiet nods. We wrote primary and two backups, then branches for the bad weather and the worst call. I kept the stacks simple, the timing clean, and the radios labeled in a way a tired person could not mess up. Coordination became a habit like breathing. I sat between intelligence and operations and translated speed into sense. My rule was that a plan had to survive the first wrong turn, because the first wrong turn always came. After action reviews, trust grew. We set phones outside, kept the rank at the door, and spoke in plain English. If I missed something, I owned it first so everyone else could follow. The nickname showed up on a dry erase board and stuck. Quiet resolve. It matched how I held a room when a clock ran out and a decision was due. The results arrived the slow way. Fewer surprises, cleaner handoffs, smoother extractions that looked boring to outsiders. The right kind of boring is what keeps people alive. Promotions followed with no speeches. A senior officer shook my hand in a hallway and told me to build a team in my own image. I picked people who listened hard, wrote clearly, and did not flinch at honest debriefs. Years made the circle tighter. A pilot who knew our cadence would ease a bird 2 minutes early because he trusted our timing. A boat crew chief would hold 30 seconds longer at the rendezvous because we had never left him out there before. I wore the weight of responsibility like a well-packed ruck. Heavy, balanced, and part of how I moved. I slept lighter and woke quicker. But I never felt alone. One afternoon between briefs, I opened my email to clear the usual noise. A subject line stopped me in my tracks. National Veterans Honor Gala. The honoree list included Colonel Patrick Hale. I read the invitation twice, then a third time. The words did not change, but my breath did. I set the phone face down and watched the room settle. I was not going for revenge. I was not going for reconciliation. I would go because truth belongs in the light. The apartment was quiet in that way only early evening can be. My dress uniform hung in the closet like a held note. I pictured the hall, the flags, and a seat that did not belong to me until I chose it. I called my mentor and waited through 2 rings. He picked up with the same steady voice he used on bad weather days. I told him the facts and left out the noise. "Show up with honor," he said. "Let your record speak. You do not need more than that." I wrote those words on a sticky note and pressed it to the mirror. They looked plain and correct. They calmed the part of me that wanted the last word. I sketched a plan on a pad. Travel alone. Sit where I am placed. Speak only if someone asks for the truth. Anger had edges I knew too well, so I set it on the counter and walked away from it. My mother's face rose instead, softer and tired, in a way I had not noticed when I was 18. I let that tenderness stay. My phone buzzed on the table. A new text slid across the screen from my mother, "Evelyn, will you be there?" Steam curls from the iron and lifts the last wrinkles from the jacket. I polish the shoes until they hold the room like a small lake. The ribbons line up clean, and the stars feel like scars turned to steel. I check seams and buttons by touch, not sight. The collar sits where it should, and the weight finds both shoulders evenly. A lint roller clears what my eyes miss. Breathe in, breathe out. I practice standing still until my heartbeat moves from my throat back to my chest. The corridor at the Kennedy Center smells like wax and old programs. Flags hang in quiet rows that guide the way. Brass drifts from somewhere ahead and fades as I turn the corner. My steps click softly on the stone. I match my pace to the distant metronome of the band. Nerves settle into a routine they recognize. The doors open to light and a low wash of voices. I pause long enough to map the room and then step inside. The uniform does most of the talking for me. I spot my father first. Patrick sits upright, jaw locked, eyes set past the stage. My mother, Evelyn, holds her clutch with both hands, and my brother Miles stares at nothing. I take an empty seat close to them without fanfare. No nods. No words. Only the quiet gravity that comes with choosing to share space without asking for permission. The cloth under my palm is cool. My shoulders square without effort. I set my cap on my lap and keep my gaze level. For a breath, the hall holds steady. Then a chair leg drags across the floor behind me. The scrape cuts through the music and does not stop. My father stands so fast his chair screams across the floor. The sound slices the music and leaves the air bare. His hand strikes. The sting flashes white and then settles into a steady burn that I already know how to carry. "You are not welcome here," he says, each word shaped for an audience. He wants the room to agree and make his judgment heavier.